Lofty dreams do not bring people to protest. Starvation does.
Constantly say, oh, we're talking to this regime. Who are you talking to, Mr. Vice President? The people of Iran or the mullahs who are killing the people of Iran? That's what the problem is.
I actually wrote an op-ed for the New York Post and said, thank you, Donald Trump, now finish the job. And that has to really be the message from the entire diaspora and inside Iran. Thank you, now finish the job.
If you will it, it's not a dream anymore. The people of Iran have willed it. It will happen. It may take some time, but by hook or by crook, it will happen.
Hi there. Survival is not victory, especially when survival has been purchased through repression rather than resolution. Let's not mistake the Islamic Republic regime's survival, for now, as evidence that it's winning anything. Now, I know if you're an Iranian anywhere around the world, you are likely frustrated, you're angry, you are aghast that the IRGC is presenting the illusion of once more consolidating its power to regrow. And if you're non-Iranian, you may think those protests were all for nothing and we're back to the status quo. And yes, this is a dictatorship far more adept at surviving than governing. And so there is a growing narrative in this summer of 2026 that says the Islamic Republic has weathered its greatest storm, that because the regime remains in power, because another nationwide uprising has not yet emerged, because Pahlavi has not returned to Tehran, because the world's attention has drifted back toward gas prices and nuclear negotiations, because Trump is trafficking in contradictory statements, that the balance has somehow shifted decisively in the regime's favor. The Strait of Hormuz was their ace, and the Islamic Republic theocracy is now back in place. Well, that conclusion is not only premature, it misunderstands what brought millions of Iranians to the edge in the first place. Don't mistake this regime's survival for victory. Think about the conditions that brought the Bazaris into the streets back in December in unprecedented numbers for the first time, igniting the Lion and Sun revolution. A dire and disastrous economy, a currency that is tanking, hyperinflation that reaches into every household, water scarcity, electricity shortages, entrenched corruption, political suffocation, institutional dysfunction, a state that has increasingly relied on repression rather than legitimacy to preserve itself. None of those conditions have receded. None of them. Rather, by almost every meaningful measure, they have deepened, and tens of thousands of Iranians have been massacred in the meantime. And of course, continued imprisonment and torture and executions. These realities do not disappear because the cameras have moved on and Mojtaba is now in charge somewhere. Don't mistake this regime's survival for victory. This is not to say that another uprising is imminent today, tomorrow. Circumstances offer no such guarantees, and history does not move according to our hopes, but neither does it move according to the timetable of those who've already declared the Islamic Republic the winner. A murderous theocracy may retain authority despite the fact that it has long lost its legitimacy. It may retain its institutions while losing the confidence of the people. It may survive a moment of extraordinary pressure without resolving the forces that created that pressure. But it won't last. Don't mistake this regime's survival for victory. It's not over, and the conditions that ignited revolution are only deepening. It's August 6, 2026. This is Roqe. Hi there, welcome to episode 455 of Roqe. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto, Canada. Salam dostan aziz, durud bar shoma. Hope you're doing okay wherever you are tuning in from around the world. Coming up on this episode 455, the Islamic Republic is still standing, but is it really winning? As many in the West move on to gas prices and diplomacy and nuclear negotiations, millions of Iranians continue to live with economic collapse, executions, repression, and a crisis that by many measures has only deepened. So has the regime weathered its greatest challenge, or are some mistaking survival for victory? Joining me are two of our favorite returning guests, Daftari, Shayan Samii, as we ask where Iran stands today, what the world is getting wrong, and whether this story is far from over. It is far from over. Let's get to it. Let me tell you about Avoca Chocolates. This episode of Roqe is brought to you with the support of Avoca Chocolates. And they have a brand new location in Toronto. We're thrilled that this small non-Iranian company in Toronto has stepped up to support Iranians so much. Noni Fembi and her staff at Avoca have been making handmade artisanal chocolate in Toronto for over 30 years. Family owned and operated, they have dedicated themselves to the art of making delicious treats, including truffles, ice cream, gelato, made without compromise. Avoca has focused on high-quality ingredients with fair trade chocolate, all made fresh daily in one of their two locations in East Toronto. They've just opened a new spot. It's at 689 Broadview Avenue in Riverdale in Toronto. Broadview Danforth. If you're in Toronto, go visit one of their great chocolate shops and thank them for their support and taste these delicious handmade chocolates. If you can't go there and get the ice cream and get the gelato, if you can't get there in person, get their chocolates and products online at avocachocolates.com. Avocachocolates.com. Thanks again, Avoca. All right, let's get to our panel for this episode of Roqe. Daftari is an Iranian-American journalist and foreign policy analyst specializing in Middle Eastern affairs, U.S. foreign policy, and counterterrorism. She is the founder and editor-in-chief of The Foreign Desk, an international news publication covering global affairs, and she regularly provides on-air analysis and exclusive reporting on major developments shaping the region. She's become one of our audience's favorite returning guests here on Roqe, and she once more joins us from Los Angeles. And speaking of returning guests, he has become a familiar and trusted voice here on Roqe since we launched our Iran Rises series about 7 months ago. Based in the Washington, D.C. area, Shayan Samii is a U.S. national security analyst and a Near East Africa and South Asia expert specializing in strategic communications, a longtime journalist and media personality. Many of you have seen him on Persian language news outlets such as Iran International. It's always a pleasure to welcome him back to the program. Shayan Samii joins us from Vienna, Virginia. Hello, you two.
Hello.
Hello, Jian. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're back in the saddle here, if you will, after Roqe Live 6, and I don't envy the two of you because I'm going to outsource this onto you to explain what's going on here. I was at a mehmooni, a sort of a gathering 2 or 3 days ago, and there was a gentleman determined telling me, be careful, in the next 24 hours, the U.S. is going to launch its biggest military attack on Iran yet. And I was saying, are you sure? Because we've heard this from President Trump before. Of course, that didn't happen. So it's this roller coaster of up and down. So let me start with a general question. Big picture. The Islamic Republic regime is still standing. So are the Iranian people who, by a large margin, oppose the regime. If you were to say which side has gained more ground in the last 6 or 7 months, what would you say, Lisa Daftari?
Gained ground as in versus the regime versus America we're talking? Or
No. The regime versus the people of Iran.
People of Iran. I would tend not to keep score at this moment. I don't think it's a fair assessment to stop at this very moment, because what we should measure is that potential, and the potential of the people to be activated and get out onto the streets. They have 50,000 Iranians to avenge, and that is no small feat, number one. But number two, it's also not a diminished power of the Iranian people. Let's rewind. We can even rewind 2 decades, right? One of the things I talk about often is the evolution of the Iranian protester. What is the profile of an Iranian protester? Well, if we start at the 1999 student uprisings, it was mainly students. It was mainly in the big cities. Then we fast forward to 2009, Green Revolution. Some people wanted reform. Some people wanted a fair election. And most people, by the end of that, evolved to say, you know what? It's the whole system. Then they got more comfortable with the idea of regime change. And since then, it has built the momentum of only asking for regime change, death to the dictator, and more and more and more, we're seeing more specific requests like asking for Reza Pahlavi to return, or asking for democratic, secular, whatever it may be, more specific requests as to having a vision for what they want. This is all power, and that is my point. To connect these dots and say that is the power of the Iranian people. Do they have weapons? No. Do they have organization? No. That is why we're fixated on the next phases of this war, which I know will continue. And I know we'll talk about what's going on right now in terms of the strategic elements of this war, kinetic and otherwise. But in terms of the people themselves, that force remains. And I think that whether it's the Americans alone or the Americans with the Israelis, have to focus on leadership and taking out more of the leadership, taking out more of the Basij, the IRGC, the leadership itself, so that we see more defections, we see more weapons on the side of the people, we see more organization and more military know-how, knowledge on the side of the people, which I do think we can achieve. And in the meantime, strategize on how to get weapons to the Iranian people. This is no secret. We were talking about this 4 or 5 years ago, behind the scenes, as to how to get weapons to the Iranian people. That has not changed. So to keep score at this very moment wouldn't be accurate. I do think we have to look at the elements, what the regime looks like right now, hanging on by a thread. And we have to remember this. The Iranian people have to overcome, mean to actually topple this regime to claim victory. The regime only needs to stay in place, only needs to survive to claim victory, and that's a big difference.
But if you say hanging on by a thread, that were they hanging on by a thread last year? I mean, or before the war last year, let's say. So I mean, if some would consider that progress, if in terms of keeping score. One of the reasons I asked the question, and I'll come to you, Shayan, is that there seems to be a developing narrative in, I mean, definitely in some places in Western media, but even someone like Piers Morgan, who was mildly supportive of the protests and would talk about them, is now saying things like, well, the regime is in place, nothing has changed, and that they tried to overthrow it, they couldn't, and it's basically status quo. And that's becoming baked in. A suggestion that the regime has not only survived but overcome this latest round of demonstrations, etc., which of course we know was more profound than ever before, as was the response. You would say what if someone said, who has emerged stronger over the last 6 or 7 months between the regime and the Iranian people themselves?
Jian, first of all, it's such a delight to be back with you and to be on a panel that Lisa Daftari is a co-panelist. So it's definitely an honor. But to answer your question, I totally agree with Lisa, because the issue is that we're a little bit comparing apples to oranges. Because on one side, we have a regime that has strengthened itself by imposing fear, by executing people just because they want to talk about freedom. And the other side does not have weapons. Their weapon is only their voice. And as soon as they bring it out and as soon as they talk, they get killed. Case in point, we had a best estimate of about 45 to 50,000 people killed in the span of 2 days just because they spoke up. And just because they said, we don't want this regime anymore. So I would say, if we want to if we want to talk about like the who won and who lost, it's an incomplete grade. I will give it an incomplete, because the regime has just tried the true and tried statements of before, that if we survive 1 day at a time, if we survive 1 week at a time, that's considered victory for us. But the other side, the people, they have to convince not just all the naysayers from within, but all the naysayers from without and in the global community, that this is a true movement. I will give you another point. In the US administration, we have the National Security Advisor, who also is the Secretary of State, on one side of the equation, and the Vice President, who were both members of the same administration, saying something totally different. Why? Because each one of them is thinking about their own political future. So right now, I think political futures of some world leaders on one side, The Islamic Republic's leadership, or whatever is left of it, on the other side, and the people of Iran in the middle. They are being torn. The
Right.
people are
Right.
being torn by these advocacy groups. But I think the mere fact that the Iranian people are sticking together and the Iranians in the diaspora are still holding the line, are still protesting, are still talking to their leaders, that matters because we need to keep the flame up and we need to remind people, like what you said about Pierce Morgan and them all, is that they do not write the future of the people of Iran. The people of Iran do, and they just have to keep it quiet and listen to the demands of the people of
Okay,
Iran.
you've both said a lot. I can tell you go on these network shows where you have to say it all in 5 minutes and get it all in one one answer because you're both very good at that. But you've said so much. Let me take it apart. And not take it apart, but let me select some of the things that you've talked about and go a little deeper with it. Shayan, you just mentioned the executions, which have to be top of mind for a lot of Iranians around the world because it's become, for what was already the leading state in terms of executions, it's become something of an epidemic. The United Nations says 56 people since March have been executed, mostly on national security charges dealing with being part of the uprising in January. We can suspect the number is much higher than that, than what the UN is saying. It's interesting, right? I mean, here's a regime that, to quote Lisa, is hanging by a thread that seems to have its best interests solved by making a deal with the U.S. It would seem counterintuitive to start executing people or continue executing people. So you wonder whether it's at all for external consumption, and that it must be for internal consumption, for people inside Iran to heed this message that you better not act out, we're going to continue doing this. Shayan, would that be the case? What do you make of the executions and the reasons for it now?
Indeed, because the regime is surviving by its power of intimidation and fear mongering. The regime is basically trying to tell the people, you either keep it quiet or we're going to kill you. You either stay out off the streets and you just go about your business. Mind you, even your business going about it is difficult because inflation is high, the economic situation is miserable, and even the people do not have the funding to be able to pay for some of the services that they desire or demand or need. So there's a shortage of medication, there's a shortage of foodstuffs, there's a shortage of basic necessities, and the parity rate of the US dollar, any foreign exchange, to the Iranian currency is so over the roof that people do not have the capacity to live in a relatively normal, I'm not saying comfortable life, normal life. So the regime is using its ability to have weapons and its ability to execute as a means to shut people up. They are trying, and you know what? They have seen results. They know that by doing this, by this fear mongering, they can at least drive a wedge. And if the Iranian community in the diaspora also were to take it easy a little bit and not pressure their relative, the governments that they live in, under immense pressure, yes, the regime is going to survive. But the mere fact that the Trump administration and some of the even Europeans are still keeping the pressure on the nations around the Persian Gulf region, under pressure that you have to do something and you have to open the Strait of Hormuz. So they have to put pressure on the Islamic Republic. It says something that these fear mongerings is probably having an effect for the regime in a short term, but in long term, they're not going to be successful. And the people have shown the tenacity, the audacity, and the capability of coming out in the street not be
Okay,
afraid of
okay,
give
yeah.
up their own
But
lives for their fellow
let me just stick
countrymen
with
to
the
live.
executions for a second. Ask Lisa as well about them because I mean, there was a time when the president of the United States, this same president, a few months ago, was saying, if you harm anybody for protesting, we're going to come after you. And now they're not just harming people; they're executing people who took part in protests. It's interesting to me that, from a foreign policy perspective, from the perspective of this American administration that is at war, essentially with the regime, one would think that this isn't registering more the executions. Is it just too normalized at this point, Lisa?
It is. I don't think it's fair to say it's not registering. Look, it's all registering. It's all part of the same system. The same. Look, let's talk about the American imperative in terms of this war is nuclear weapons. So the same regime that has no problem killing 50,000 of its best and brightest young people will have no issue using a nuclear weapon against its enemies. So I think it's all one and the same. And I do think that the Trump administration understands the adversary that they're up against. There's one other thing that we're missing here is that regardless of the headlines, regardless of what you hear, Donald Trump, one day they're great people and one day they're the worst. I'm never going to, sit down with them again. Regardless of those headlines, that economic pressure is still marinating onto the regime, and that is what they will have to reckon with. If the war stops today, the regime knows that it's going to be up against protests months from now, if not days from now. Why? Because it's not sustainable. To Shayan's point, people are unemployed, people can't put food on the table, and that as much as people want regime change, they want democracy, they want freedom, that is not what drives people out onto the streets.
Yep.
Lofty dreams do not bring people to protest. Starvation does.
And how, I mean,
Employment.
the Iranian economy is projected to shrink this year by 5%. Inflation is approaching 70%.
How is that sustainable? How
So
is that
at what
sustainable?
point exactly then? What point does economic collapse become a genuine political threat to
Right.
the Islamic Republic regime?
Which is why they're continuing with the executions. It brings it full circle. The reason they're doing that now is to say, if you guys think it's bad, it could get worse. You could be killed for actually speaking up against whatever it is, the economy, your jobs, the bazaar, your teaching job, your pension, whatever it is. This is them in desperation mode. As much as it looks like confidence, in some aspects it is confidence, but it also is survival mode. They need to survive, and they know that this is, the economy, what they've done. There will perhaps be land blockades, no import, no export, no way to sell oil, no way to collect money. All the sanctions, no money up front. This is not an Obama era deal. At least I hope not. That's not what it looks like we're moving towards. And this is to Cheyenne's point, it's day by day survival, and that means that they will keep in mind the main enemy, which is within the majority of 92 million Iranians who don't want this regime. So they're walking and chewing gum at the same time while they are dealing with Hormuz and regional shenanigans, lobbing missiles into Kuwait and other places. They're also keeping in mind that there is the chance for another grassroots uprising that will threaten the regime with or without
Okay.
weapons. So what can they do? They can use the weapons that they have, the leverage that they have at home, which is the guillotine, which is the crane, which is hanging innocent young Iranian people and scaring the rest of them as to not come out
Right.
onto the streets.
To be fair, Cheyenne, we have talked about economic collapse on this program before, actually for years. I mean, I remember 3 or 4 years ago doing something about the price of eggs, and how is Iran possibly going to continue to function based on the hyperinflation, etc. And certainly over the last year or a couple of years, and certainly in the last 6 7 months, talking about not just the state of the economy and the bankruptcy of the currency and the inflation, but also talking about the water bankruptcy and the energy shortages and electricity, etc. So that it creates this kind of we had a guest on a few months ago that said, instead of an explosion, i.e. a revolution, what might happen is an implosion, that Iran just stops functioning in some way, and that leads to the end of this regime. How close are we to something like that?
We're pretty close because Yunja, let's take one item at a time. Let's talk about the economy. The economy, at the best rate, we're talking about a 70% inflation. What does that mean? That means that people's buying power is pretty much eliminated. People, if they were buying something for $1 yesterday, they have to pay $5 today. And that just means that, but their income level does not increase at that rate. Their capacity has been diminished. That's one thing. Then, the shortage of availability of stuff. Main important thing, medication. People in the United States, if there is a shortage of high blood pressure medication, there will be a conniption. Everybody will be up in arms. In Iran, even a shortage of high blood pressure medication is at a rampant point that people will have to pay twice, three times the normal price to just have available medication to live. But that means that they have to siphon away the money that they had been allocating for rice and bread to be able to have the medication. That's why I'm saying the economy is at such a peril that it is unsurvivable.
But I'm also saying that not only have we been saying that for a long time, but the resilience of the Iranian people is incredible, right? These things become normalized in a way that we wouldn't be able to even understand here in North America. Imagine telling people in North America, your electricity is going to be shut off for 5 or 6 hours a day, or something like that. That's now normal. I mean, my relatives and friends in Iran don't even talk to me about that anymore. That's just baked in, right? As is the economy. So that breaking point, the goalposts keep getting pushed by the dysfunction of this regime, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether that implosion comes.
I don't think there would be an implosion. I actually think it's dangerous to get to that level because you have China hovering, and they may come in, not because they care so much about the Iran regime, but because it's on clearance, right? Cheap, and they can get access. So access to infrastructure, access to technology, which they already have a lot of, and buy it over and make sure that they survive. I think that's one of the huge dangers. I know Marco Rubio understands this. I know Donald Trump has alluded to it, but we have to be much more strategic, even in our approach to deterrence right now, so that the Chinese understand that this is not going to be a free-for-all once this war is either comes to some sort of a pause or conclusion, for China to swoop right in and benefit from it, which they again already are. This needs to be addressed. Another thing that we've been talking about a lot is how the United States has basically blown through our munitions stockpile, and that we may not have enough to battle go to war with a second adversary. Again, China. This is very poor messaging from the White House. We have to make it known that we will stand up to China and we will not tolerate this behavior. We can't have Donald Trump traveling to China, all the pleasantries, patting each other on the back, and then on his way home, we find out that they're selling missiles again to the regime or some sort of satellite technology or whatever it may be. Russia as well, but Russia obviously is not in such a great position right now to be doing all those things, but they also have a vested interest in making sure the regime stays in place. So all of these things are very much connected. We have to understand that, look, they will find a way to find a lifeline. That's why we have to make sure that we take away their life. And that's exactly, literally and figuratively, this regime has to be removed in order for us to not have them sprout up again. Their nuclear program will sprout up again. Missiles and drones will stock up again. Their proxies will be funded again. The executions will happen again and again and again, because this is the only way this regime knows how to survive and will survive if we allow them to.
Those are very profound points. Let me ask you both something that might seem kind of obvious or naive, but just give me a brief answer, because I want to hear you both speak on this. Why has I've done a couple of essays about this. Why has the international conversation shifted so far away from the Iranian people themselves? In other words, we hear now, of course, about nuclear negotiations and regional security in the Strait of Hormuz, etc., not political prisoners and executions and the massacre of tens of thousands, which, frankly, I mean, one of the greatest massacres of the last, century, and it's really not even in the conversation. Marco Rubio accepted, perhaps. Lisa, briefly, you would say why?
I think because there have been so many other geopolitical consequences, and the world runs on money and markets and oil and all of these other things that when we as Iranians talk about that death toll, something happens to us viscerally. I do believe that people care, but I do think that those who are in charge have their own imperatives, they have their own priorities, and the human rights always across the board. I can't think of one example where the human rights will trump, any sort of geopolitical, standard here. So I think that's the reason. I think this has been a very complicated task. It wasn't a slam dunk foreign policy move like removal of Maduro in Venezuela was, for example. I think it was very, very complicated. The regime is very, very manipulative and very smart. And the way that they have really masterfully shifted the narrative of war to Hormuz. We're not even talking about nuclear weapons. Forget about the Iranian people are further down on the list in terms of, again, American priorities. We're not talking about
Shayan, you would say what?
I would say it's a matter of having a seat at the table. Energy, oil, economy, global economic well-being, they all have a seat at the table. The Iranian people do not. Who is supposed to be advocating for the people of Iran? The regime? No. The United States government? No, because every one of them is interested in their own national security interests. So right now, I think by us in the diaspora, keeping the people of Iran's aspirations and goals up and being available in the media to constantly talk about this, and also to beat down on the likes of Piers Morgan and all of them who keep saying, oh, this is a lost cause. Oh, we need to move on. No, we have to keep up the pressure. But I would like to add one more piece to this. Right now, what makes Americans tick against this conflict? They're paying more at the gas pumps. They're paying more for some of their basic necessities. If we make that a reality, that, hey, if we don't free the people of Iran, this is going to be something ongoing, then everybody and their grandmother will pay attention.
Yeah, or the flip side of that is let's not create any more issues in this region. Just keep the status quo as it is so the gas prices go back down.
Keeping the status quo means the regime will stay in power.
Yes,
and
that's what I fear Western governments are banking on. I mean, I wanted to ask a related question to the lack of attention on human rights, which I think you both eloquently what you say makes sense, Lisa. Of course, it's the reality of the world, but hence I said it's sort of a naive question, but I think it's worth talking about the fact that it's not getting talked about, the thousands that have been killed and the ongoing executions, etc. In a world that speaks so much about human rights and is so concerned about people. The related question being that it seems like there are many governments that are appearing prepared to negotiate and be okay with this regime again, move forward with the Islamic Republic once again. And it's hard to tell whether that's because they've just sort of decided, well, we don't like these guys, but they're probably going to stay, so we should probably, continue to do business with them, or that there's actually something to be gained by having this murderous regime still in power. It's good for business somehow. I mean, you even have the likes of our Prime Minister Mark Carney talking about reopening a Canadian embassy in Iran, which hadn't been the case since 2012. And just the idea that that's something you'd even talk about now suggests a lot. So, why is that? Why, Lisa, are these Western governments prepared to negotiate and be okay with this regime again?
Yeah, the nations of the world fall into two categories. The first category are those who wouldn't mind regime change in Iran. They just don't want to pay for it or have any consequences like the surrounding Arab countries. Some of them fall into that category. The rest of them will benefit. I'm talking about European countries, some of the Arab countries. Canada perhaps as well. The status quo works for them. They benefit from it, and they're ready to march on. No war, no, etc. This is where, and I will segue back to your previous question, why strategic communications is so important right now. And there is a way to link human rights with the geopolitical imperatives of the West. And that is to say, if we are against forever wars, if we're against the West having a presence in the Middle East, if we are against, having these terror proxies here in the West among us, car rammings in Europe and car rammings and attacks on synagogues and kosher restaurants in Canada, the list goes on and on. If we want an end to all of that, then we have to stomach a bit more of this war to get rid of it forever and ever. Otherwise, we will just kick the can down the road and we will have perpetual forever wars going on forever and ever. And that has not been communicated well to the American people so that they understand that a few cents at the gas pump, we had higher prices during the beginning of the Ukraine war under Biden. Nobody talks about this. Then they talk about a death toll of 18. You have to compare apples to apples. You don't compare a death toll of 18 to a random Tuesday from last year. You compare it to other wars, major significant wars that were consequential in our history where thousands and thousands have died. I'm not saying any American should die. Every single one of those lives have to be celebrated and really their families, but my heart goes out to all of them. No one should even suffer a scraped knee for this regime and those mullahs. But the bottom line is this: it's the reality of war, it's the reality of moving the needle significantly enough so that it serves our national security. And guess what? Of course, it's going to help the human rights conditions on the ground in the Middle East. Of course, it's going to help the neighboring Arab states. Of course, it's going to help prosperity in the Middle East. Just look at the Abraham Accords. This will put that on steroids to remove this murderous regime from that region. So all of these dots have to be connected. How the removal of this regime will help us economically, in terms of geopolitics, and of course, human rights in Iran.
Shayan, do you worry about Western governments cozying up to the regime again?
Yeah, because what they are thinking about, Jian, is their own national security interests, as I have said. So one thing we have to constantly bring up is that we have to let them know there is a problem with especially the US administrations that throughout the history of the Islamic Republic, they have tried to manage the Islamic Republic, not confront it. Because the Islamic Republic thrives on just buying time. The Islamic Republic wants that back and forth, the bazaar mentality to haggle over everything. If the US administration and other global administrations learn that this is a menace and we have to confront it, and it is in the best interest of their people for long term so that they are not caught in a perpetual war that as time goes by, every 5 years, we have to go back to the same drawing boards, then yes, they have to confront the Islamic Republic now, head on. Don't cozy up to them. Don't give them an inch and put their backs to the wall and see whether they will fold or they will hold.
We often talk about what the regime is not good at. The mismanagement, the corruption, the dysfunction. They're pretty good at surviving. Would it be fair to say that the regime, the Islamic Republic regime, is better at surviving than it is at governing, Shayan?
Yes, yes. They have mastered the art of survival because and their mentality, Jian, is 2 weeks, 2 weeks at a time. Just by buying 2 weeks' time, then at the end of the second week, they will say, oh, we haven't done this, or we haven't been able to check everything with our supreme leader, so we need an additional 2 weeks. And the world keeps acquiescing to that. That's what the problem is. If there is a true confrontation and telling this regime no means no. 2 weeks is 2 weeks. It doesn't mean 2 plus 3 days. And that is when they will reality will hit them and they will realize that, oh, we have to make a decision right now. Imagine if there was a sustained pressure on them and not giving in to the, oh, the global energy prices have gone up. If the world community can trust their people and also share the reality on the scene with their people, I'm sure people of the world will manage a month or two of hardship for a long-term life of living in better conditions for the entire world.
Lisa, are we still looking at a clerical regime, or has Iran effectively become an IRGC state?
I think they're one and the same.
Yeah.
I don't see anything different. I just see that this is perhaps we're seeing them in hardline mode, but they always had this mode. This was within their regime. It's not anything different except that I think they're very good at, like you said, not just staying in power, but really narrative warfare, painting the picture and putting it out there, and all the things that are not tangible, right? They're not good as good on the military battlefield or at governing, but they're great at the negotiation table. They're great at spinning the narrative. They're great at importing that narrative and finding the useful idiots in the West. Look at all these amazing Americans and Canadians and Europeans who are actually rooting for this deadly, deadly regime. So I think that is what they're great at. And that's just not within this war. They've been doing it for 20 plus years where they've been exporting this narrative. And I think we're living the consequences of that. Their favorite weapon, again, is diplomacy. Sitting down at the negotiation table is their best bet at really getting a leg up and really gaining leverage in this war. And I know the administration at this point does understand that. I just think that with regards to their domestic timeline, they may be giving a strategic advantage to the regime that is just looking to buy time.
Well,
and
let me get to.
Can I add one thing?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to add something to what Lisa John was mentioning, and that is this regime also has mastered the art of driving a wedge among Western governments and Western leaders. But by doing what? By having capable lobbyist groups, especially in the United States, to influence those who are a little on the flimsy side of things. Case in point, they will find a way to find a direct link to the office of the Vice President of the United States, put enough doubt or give him enough ammunition to constantly say, oh, we're talking to this regime. Who are you talking to, Mr. Vice President? The people of Iran or the mullahs who are killing the people of Iran? That's what the problem is, that these guys have mastered the art of strategic communication to drive a wedge and basically stay in power.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. It's not just about, a couple of things that they're good at, not just surviving, but spinning the narrative that has been so successfully done that, as Lisa says, Western campuses and interest groups are the example of it. Here in Toronto, I mean, I don't know what you're seeing where you guys live in DC and LA, but it is now normal. Commonplace to see people walking around downtown with the Jomhuri Islami, the Islamic Republic flag, and it's something that even 2 years ago we would have thought was unheard of. Placards of Khomeini and as a martyr and these flags. So they've come a long way in that sense. You both mentioned the U.S. administration, and I have to say, I mean, I like to think that I'm kind of somebody who reads a lot and tries to keep abreast of what's going on, especially so I can have these kind of conversations. And when I started this conversation saying I'm going to outsource this to you guys, it's partly because I literally don't know what's going on with this American administration vis-a-vis Iran. I mean, I really don't. One moment at a time, I can hear Marco Rubio, I can take a Trump statement, I can sort of see one action that they're taking, but it really, because people ask me, what do you think is going to happen? It's like asking me at this point, I'm a football expert, but the football game hasn't started. They're asking me about the coin toss. Is it going to be a heads or tails? I really don't know. So, Lisa, can you make sense of this for us at all in terms of what is happening with the American administration vis-a-vis the Islamic Republic of Iran?
I can try. It seems to me that Donald Trump attempts to do two things at once, and that is to deliver a stern message to the mullahs, particularly regarding Hormuz, so that then we can move on to the nuclear enterprise. But at the same time, manage a not escalating this war to a full-on World War III, what everybody was worried about, or escalated beyond what it needs to be escalated towards. Saudi warned him. I know people in his own camp have whispered in his ear. So he's very fearful of escalation. So this is, and also, of course, we're up against the midterms. It's no secret here in this country. There are headlines about us, moving too quickly through our basically our military apparatus. All of that aside, he's trying to pump the brakes a bit on the speed at which this war is moving forward. That being said, every single day is micro analyzed to say it's the end of the war. We're surrendering. The regime won. This happened, that happened. I do think this is a long game. I don't think this is something that can be analyzed. You asked at the top of the show, what's the scorecard? I don't think this is over by any means. I do think it'll pick up on the other side of the midterms. The two things that I'm watching for is that we don't make Obama era errors, and that's two things. Number one, any sort of cash or sanctions up front, and number two, managing or acknowledging that this regime will stay in place and have nuclear weapons, and only trying to dampen or slow down the speed at which they reach capability. That is a huge mistake. I think the assumption going forward for the Trump administration should be that we will degrade this regime to the point of collapse and then hand it over to the Iranian people. That's what he said in the first hours of the war. I know things have changed on the ground. This is not an easy task. It's very difficult to assess all the moving parts. Again, they moved the entire theater of war to Hormuz. We're talking about something that we weren't even talking about February 28th. So I think, once he overcomes that challenge, and he should militarily, I believe, there's no other way to make them understand that Hormuz has to be open. That was the only thing they had to do as part of the MOU, and they didn't do it. So we know the foregone conclusion. We will not have a meaningful deal with this regime. I know the Trump administration knows it, we know it, everybody knows it, but at the same time, what does it mean when he wants to slow this down, and what will it take to slow it down so that he has enough time to, again, heal us domestically? I actually am very happy that the markets and the gas prices here have not knee-jerked the way that we would have thought they would have in the last 2 weeks of kinetic warfare. I think they've been managed well enough. It's summer break. People want to go on vacations. Gas prices matter. Airline tickets matter. All of that. But I again think that people have it in their heads. It's not even just the lefties who are marching around with keffiyehs or praising Khamenei or Mojtaba. It's not that. It's that they've also gotten into the Republican Party, and now Donald Trump has his own party doubting the war. This was not necessary. And I'm not just talking about the Tuckers of the world. I'm talking about level-headed Republicans who were perhaps for the war and now have gotten cold feet about it because of the results or because of how long it's taking. This is how wars are won. This is how they're fought. They take time, and this, I think, is the most important and consequential battle of our generation. I do hope that he sticks it through, and that people understand how important this is to us.
Okay. I hear you on all of those points, and at the same time, this is how it goes. These things take time. I mean, I hear myself saying that to some people. But Lisa, shouldn't the United States in 2026 have the intelligence, have the military wherewithal, have the resources, have the capability, have the pedigree to not get into a situation like this? I mean, when this began, and they put that 6 week, this is going to be done in 6 weeks, it seemed like it was going to be another operation, which maybe we've gotten used to over the years, whether we like them or not, the interventions where the United States goes and does something and seems to know what it's doing, that it doesn't become Vietnam. And so are we not letting them off the hook a little bit by, well, this is just the way wars go?
Two things that I understand from my sources. Number one, in the beginning of this war, I heard from several generals who were working on the military strategy that the president wanted this war to be designed to have several off ramps, meaning he didn't want this to escalate. He's not he campaigned on no more forever wars, particularly of this caliber, right? And he got himself into the biggest, again, war of our generation. I think it will continue to be, or the most consequential, for that matter. And so he wanted there to be an opportunity to again pump the brakes and not have this escalate. Number two, he's under tremendous pressure from the Saudis, from his own party, obviously from the opposition party, from the European allies. He's under tremendous pressure to basically wrap this up, not allow it to continue. So at the same time, he understands what the goal is. I think, if I were advising him, I would say forget about infrastructure, forget about a random bridge, forget about a random railroad, but focus on the regime itself. If you need to bring in the Israelis for their very, very high level intel on the leadership, that's what needs to be done. The Israelis have one goal, also to survive. And this is an existential threat. So I think one of the reasons that Trump hasn't been able to bring Bibi into this phase of the war is because at this point, if he brings them in, he can no longer restrain them, and he shouldn't restrain them the way he has back in the June war and in the first phase of this war from February to April. If he brings them in, it's game over.
What would have happened if he hadn't restrained them?
I think the Israelis were focused on one thing that the Americans did not have the intel for, and that is the leadership, focusing in on getting into the bedrooms of the leadership. If you can kill them at scale, I'm not talking about the first, second, I'm talking get in deep into the thousands of IRGC militia, into the Basij. Let them be scared, let them be paranoid, let them defect, let them take off their uniforms, put their weapons down. This is what it will take. And that is a 2-for-1, because you're also creating more security and stability on the ground, allowing the Iranian people to take over the next phase.
I think there was a lot of anticipation that was happening after the first couple of weeks, especially. Why did that stop?
I think the Trump administration and foolishly, I believe, in several spurts, believed that they can find people within this regime, like a Darcy Rodriguez of Venezuela, to deal with and to find the more moderates. And that is the Vance, right, a point of view in the administration, that it's good enough. We had regime change. Look, anyone who's dealt with them, whether it's Jared or Witkoff or Vance or Rubio or Donald Trump himself or Hegseth, knows that there is not one good person. The very definition of this regime is to be a terror entity, to export its terror ideology from 1979. Death to America is a thing. They mean it. It's not just a slogan. And this would be an opportunity squandered if they did not go all the way, at least to the point of collapse, so that the Iranian people could determine their own future.
I'm sorry, Shayan, I've left you. I've been having this conversation with Lisa, so let's bring you in on this same question around how you interpret the roller coaster nature of the way the U.S. seems to be prosecuting this.
Jian, one word: democracy. Democracy is messy. In a democratic world, you have to manage and assuage so many different feelings and so many different thought processes that it becomes a little complicated. Add to all of this a president who has a huge ego, who wants to be known as the arbiter of all good and not responsible for anything negative. And add to this an adversary who is very good at strategic communication. What went wrong in this process is the Trump administration started it very well, but instead of handing the communication to a strategic communication shop, the president tried to manage it with his own through social posts. That's where the Islamic Republic realized, aha, we can drive a wedge between the Israelis and the US administration. We can drive a wedge between the Marco Rubios of the world and the J.D. Vances, the Steve Witkoffs and the Jared Kushner.
Sorry, the strategic messaging shop would have been Israel? Or instead of the...
No. A messaging shop that knows a war mentality.
It'd be Shayan and myself.
Right. Oh, right. Okay.
If we're smart.
And that basically is to talk about the necessities of success. Success means what? Dumping the regime, getting rid of this mullah regime. I totally agree with Lisa. If the United States had just managed to stay in the South and allow the Israelis to go by their pinpointing and basically taking one by one of the regime personnel. Let me give you one example. I heard from a dear friend of mine who was at the very neighborhood of where the Islamic Republic's intelligence minister was found and killed. He said, look, this guy apparently lived here for 4.5 years, and we did not know this guy is living here. We did not know this dude was living in the next building. And then all of a sudden, our building shook, and he said, I fell off my chair. And later on, we were told, oh, Khatib lived next door, and he was just killed. Israelis are that good. But what is happening in the United States? The United States administration, by its on again, off again, lack of strategic communication capabilities, are allowing anti-Israel, anti-Semitism feelings to creep in. Case in point, last night in Michigan, the Democratic Party chose a nominee for the U.S. Senate as someone who says we should cut off all funding to Israel. Does that make real sense? That you have one real partner in the Middle East and you want to abandon them? And who do you want to support? Hamas, the Islamic Republic? So that's why I say the biggest thing that has gone wrong is this administration has not been consistent with strategic messaging and by not being able to keep Donald Trump in check. There is no Susie Wiles, the chief of staff at the White House, on this operation to tell him, cut off, don't talk, let the responsible parties handle it.
I guess Rubio doesn't have his ear to that extent.
He's more concerned about his own 2028 aspirations. So he's at this point, I would think he's probably thinking, hey, if J.D. Vance is going forward and is trying to hang himself, let him do it. That will be more TV advertising for me in 2027, 2028.
A final question to both of you. To what extent is the place that we're at now in terms of it not being ideal? No, let me not ask it that way. That's not fair. What can the Iranian opposition in the diaspora do better at this stage? Shayan.
Oh, ladies first. Come on. You want me to go first? I'll go. Here's the problem. Lack of cohesiveness, lack of unity, and lack of one messaging. When the Islamic Republic sees that we have 30 different casts and characters who are on social media going at it, they're like, you know what, boys? Let us just sit back and relax and have a popcorn and enjoy the show. Because these guys are battling it out and they are just duking it out and they are destroying each other. Mm. But if we have a cohesive messaging that the world community needs to understand, if the Iranian people do not have a seat at the table, that table is corrupt. That negotiation and set of negotiations is absolutely worthless. And if we harp on that day in and day out and go lobby different entities within the United States, within the European community, and bringing the world community together, just like what we had at the beginning of this conflict, and also when we had the Mahsa Amini revolution, that cohesiveness that we created, the Islamic Republic was able to drive a wedge, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. We have to take that element away from them.
Lisa?
I actually did a briefing for a congressman a few weeks ago, an American congressman, and after the briefing, I asked him, I mean, he's on our side. I want to preface it by saying that, but after when he was done with his questions, I asked him, what could we do better? What could the Iranian community do better? And he said, we don't see you anymore. In terms of all the things that we were doing on February 28th, in terms of the protests and the op-eds and the celebrations and getting that message to the White House. Right after I spoke with him, I actually wrote an op-ed for the New York Post and said, "Thank you, Donald Trump. Now finish the job." And that has to really be the message from the entire diaspora and inside Iran. Thank you. Now finish the job. I think that goes a long way. I know a lot of people get cold feet. I know a lot of Iranians, as Shayan said, are wishy-washy, as we call them, Hezbollah. They're the party of the wind, and very fickle politically. First it's thank you. It was great for February 28th. They were dancing, and now they're saying, Donald Trump's the worst thing that ever happened. Why did he even start the war, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's very important to stay on target, stay, patient, and really stay visible. I think every single human being has a voice, has a platform, has, is a sort of citizen journalist with a social media account. Keep it going, share, talk, advocate. There's nothing too local about this. You can, tell your local Rotary or library or friend or neighbor, do what you can to get the message out there on behalf of the Iranian people, why this is so, so, so important.
Yep.
I really appreciate you both. Very quickly, how do I ask this without it being a leading question? Because I don't want you to just give me a platitude. I was going to ask you if you remain hopeful, but don't give me a platitude. Give me an honest answer. Be Roqe. Do you remain hopeful that in the near future there's going to be a change that the majority of Iranians around the world have been seeking for a long time? Shayan?
Yes, I'm an eternal optimist. I believe in the power of the people. And I believe in one simple statement. If you will it, it's not a dream anymore. The people of Iran have willed it. It will happen. It may take some time, but by hook or by crook, it will happen.
There you go, Lisa. Lisa, no pressure after that.
No, I'm optimistic, but not just because it's an emotional thing, but more so factually on the ground. I'm watching this. I mean, I watch this up close, and when you look at the way that the Israeli people and the Iranian people have united, the way that the children of the Middle East, regardless of country, have moved towards the West and are really shunning. They're more against Hamas than the kids in our universities are. And that tells me a lot. That's what gives me hope every single day, to look at the results of the Abraham Accords, to see anti-Semitism disappearing from the Middle East, to see borders disappearing from the Middle East, wanting to work together, wanting to just have fun, live a free life, explore, be prosperous. These are the values that the young people of the Middle East and this generation has, and that's what gives me hope. So there's going to be a reckoning with the Iranian people that the regime understands it will have to face when this war is all over. If they're still in power, it will not be easy on them. But that's what really gives me hope, is that the next generation understands, geopolitics better than most in the West do. And that to me is a new day for the Middle East.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
See
Thank you.
As ever, a big thank you to Lisa and Shayan, the dynamic duo. We always appreciate having them on and hearing their perspective. This is a confused time, as even in the last hour, as you've heard, there's a lot of different perspectives to have on what's going on. So if you want to share yours with us, more than happy to hear it and perhaps read your letter on the air. info@roqemedia.com. info@roqemedia.com is where to reach us. Of course, you can also give us your comments on any of our platforms, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, on SoundCloud, Instagram, etc. This is full time for this edition of Roqe. Thank you to the amazing core team who put this show together each week. Super Parisa Sanjirani and Savvy Roham Meher, as well as our extended Roqe family. The photo and video queen Tina Farahi, smart Pega Ganji, charming Kimia, the CK, talented Anahita, methodical Kaveh, and special thanks to TRK, the rising Keon, for your help. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us, for spreading the word about Roqe and sharing our content. If you're not already a subscriber, it's never too late. It's free. You can subscribe on any of our platforms if you haven't done so already. You can find us on Instagram at Roqe Media. You can find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. And as ever, please be advised to heed the words of my Uncle Behrang. Mizun Bashim.